I'd like to welcome you. My name is Renee Forsyth. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Lyme Connect. And as a visual description, I am a white female with shoulder length brown hair, and I am wearing green today for St. Patrick's Day. And I have a green Lyme branded background behind me. So thank you for joining this important discussion. This panel discussion is a part of our broader Voices of Lyme series, where we spend time gaining a deeper understanding of the experiences of people with different disabilities. In recognition of Brain Injury Awareness Month here in the US, we're pleased to take this opportunity to learn more about the experiences of people with traumatic brain injuries. And because we felt like this conversation was so important, we have opened this topic and this webinar up to the public. So some of you may not be familiar with Lyme Connect, so I'm just going to take a brief moment to tell you a little bit about us. We are a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to rebrand disability through achievement. We do that by attracting high potential professionals and university students, including veterans, into the Lyme network. These are individuals with all types of disabilities. So if you're joining us and you are a person with any disability, we encourage you to join the Lyme network. Once you do, we prepare our network members with the essential tools and confidence that helps you achieve your goals. And we also connect our network members for scholarships, leadership programs, internships, and full-time careers with the world's leading corporations, Lyme's corporate partners. We have two representatives from our corporate partners here with us today on the panel. In turn, we also support our corporate partners in recruiting, onboarding, developing, retaining, and promoting all employees who have disability. Together, Lyme Connect with our network members and our corporate partners, we celebrate the strengths and talents of people with disabilities. So we're really excited to dig into this conversation today. I'm thrilled to have my colleague, Jennifer Grauso, who is the Director of Engagement at Lyme Connect, as our moderator today. Jenn brings over 20 years of experience in higher education and career services. She's passionate about helping students and professionals connect to meaningful career opportunities and building more inclusive pathways to employment. As someone with lived experience herself, as someone with disabilities, Jenn brings both professional expertise and a personal perspective to conversations around accessibility and inclusion. We're delighted to have Jenn moderating this TBI panel alongside our incredible panelists. So now let's welcome Jenn and the panelists. Thanks, Jenn.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee. As mentioned, I am Jenn Grauso, Director of Engagement at Lyme Connect. As a brief visual description, I am a white woman with long dark hair, and today I'm wearing a beige top. 2 years ago, I had surgery to remove a meningioma brain tumor. Since then, I have been living with the effects of traumatic brain injury, including vestibular migraines and ocular seizures. This wasn't my first major health issue. About 16 years ago, I had thyroid cancer, surgery, and radiation. So my experience with disability and chronic illness has been building over time. Today, I manage life with several medications, ongoing medical appointments, and symptoms like fatigue and sensory sensitivity. I also successfully manage a full professional and personal life. Balance is something that I am constantly striving towards. But I am very glad for conversations like this, and I am honored to be joined by two incredible panelists. I will let them introduce themselves and tell their TBI stories. Camille, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Jenn. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today to hear our stories. My name is Camille Gonzalez, and my pronouns are she, ella, they. As it pertains to a visual description, I am a Dominican American woman, long, curly, dark hair. And today I am wearing a purple turtleneck. I forgot to wear green today. but just know that it's in my heart. I'm wearing green. So just a little bit about my story, and before I get into my story, a little bit about my background. So I am a team lead for the Americas at Bloomberg LP, a financial software company headquartered in New York City. And I manage the talent acquisition, inclusive programs, and events team. And my team's focus is building a workforce that reflects the world around us by bringing together a rich variety of perspectives and experiences. Now, going back into my journey within the TBI space, back in 2021, I was diagnosed with brain cancer and then quickly moved into getting what's called a craniotomy, and so a surgery to remove said tumor. The journey did not stop with surgery. In fact, I jumped into radiation and chemotherapy thereafter. I like to say I'm pretty efficient. And so within a year's time from diagnosis to finishing treatment, I was able to come out of treatment, successfully having beaten brain cancer and, working to understand the new Camille and the new challenges that were arising for me, given the symptoms and the kind of after effects of the tumor and all of the treatment that came with that. But I am so stoked to be here with all of you today and with the panelists and the Lime Connect team to talk about our journey. This is something so important for us to talk about. But I'll pause there. Carol, over to you.
Thank you so much, Camille. And thanks everyone for joining. Also, a big thank you to Lime Connect for hosting this important session. Hi, everyone. My name is Carol Mendonça. My pronouns are she, her. And for those who may not see me, I'm a tanned woman with long, dark hair, wearing a white top with a blue sweater. I also did not wear green today. Forgot about that. I'm a director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at Deloitte Canada, where I focus on building more inclusive and accessible environments across workplace practices, leadership, and how we think about talent more broadly. I also lead accessibility internally at Deloitte Canada and co-authored our accessibility action plan, and also support clients in building more inclusive organizations. In terms of my story, over 10 years ago, I experienced my first sports-related traumatic brain injury. It was through a martial arts training accident. And at that time, it had a significant impact on my life. And it took quite a while to recover from. And there were some longer term effects that I just learned to manage over time. That experience was actually what first led me into accessibility work. It gave me a very personal understanding of how environments can either support or limit people. And then about 2.5 years ago, I was in a serious car accident, and that resulted in another brain injury. And that recovery period was also very significant. For about 3 months, I wasn't able to walk or speak normally. And the overall recovery took about over a year and a half. And as someone who has always been very active and very driven, it really forced me to slow down in ways I never expected. And it also gave me a much deeper understanding of what people with invisible disabilities experience. So I'll just pause there. Thanks.
Thank you both. Thank you for sharing. And I'd like to recognize that TBI can look different for everyone, as we just heard. For me, the impact is physical and cognitive, but also situational. As I experience vestibular migraines and ocular seizures, things like bright screens, visual stimulation, that can cause cognitive overload. Fatigue is also a very real part of my daily life. And Camille and Carol, you brought this up. I don't know how to slow down. That's just not something I'm very good at. But this has definitely forced me to be more intentional about managing my energy. I look for ways to ease the impact through things like dark screen mode or wearing tinted glasses, taking breaks to rest my eyes. Living with this TBI it means constantly managing my energy, my attention, and my environment. So, Carol, can you share with us your experience of living with the TBI, how this impacts you, and anything else how you would describe it for us?
Sure. Thank you, Jen. And thanks for sharing your experience. I definitely have some similarities in mine. I think one of the most complex aspects of a traumatic brain injury is that it's largely visible. So, from the outside, people may see someone who appears fully capable, but internally there can be things like, as you mentioned, cognitive fatigue, sensory sensitivity, or even just needing more time to process information. For me personally, a lot of it presents in sensory and cognitive ways. So things like managing stimulation, managing energy, and being mindful of how much cognitive load I could take on in a day, which never seems to end. I've always been someone who really enjoys physical activity as well, personally, things like extreme sports and more intense training. So part of this has been learning how to balance that physical energy with the cognitive demands. And as work becomes more demanding and continues to become more demanding, I've had to scale back and be more intentional. So now I gravitate towards, lower impact activities like tennis and Pilates and running. And it's been a true learning journey on how to balance that. And I would say professionally, it's meant learning how to structure my work and my schedule just more intentionally. So structure really helps. It creates predictability, I would say, where your brain doesn't have to do the extra work. And I'm very intentional about what I do when there's demanding work in front of me and when I need recovery time. And I would say I'm very fortunate to have a team that really supports that way of working as well. So for me, it's less about pushing through anymore, and it's more about being very intentional about my energy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Camille?
So, I was sitting here laughing at myself because one of the ways in which my TBI shows up is short-term memory loss. And so can we just can we go back to the question, Jen, please?
Yes, absolutely. So we want to talk a little bit about how living with a traumatic brain injury impacts you personally and or professionally.
Thank you. Um, so a few things that I wanted to share, and Carol, I, echo a lot of what you already mentioned there, but I wanted to take a bit of a different approach. For me, I mean, I have to say, I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated. I was angry. I was, all of the words when everything kind of first transpired. And I failed to mention earlier, within my journey, I was having what I now know were seizures for months, like over 6 months. And before I went to, go to a doctor and see what's going on. And I went to a neurologist and they had me drawing circles, touching my nose with different hands, all of these things. And they're like, I think it's just your hormones, or you may just be having anxiety and things like this. And I very much so felt like I do think that something is going on here. And what I want to just call out is advocacy is so important, especially when we're talking about medical support. And I'll also call out a little bit more, and it gets even deeper when you are of a different gender, of an underrepresented gender. And so for myself being a woman, a lot of those excuses came of, because women and hormones and estrogen and so on and so forth. And so I told my neurologist, I was like, I would like to work with you to see how I can get an MRI. I think something's going on. And once they found, we did the MRI on that same day. 2 weeks later, I then went into surgery. And my whole life changed. But coming out of treatment, coming out of surgery, and all of these things, it was frustrating because things that I found easy to do previously, like public speaking and other things as it pertains to my memory, I was having so many challenges with. And I really kind of had to choose. It's either I can wallow or I can start to problem solve, something I do really well. And so I said, okay, what systems currently exist and what doesn't exist? And the thing is, it's not like it's from one day to another where you're going to know, where I knew exactly what support I needed. I think that that's a lot when it comes to accommodations. We don't know until we're faced with a challenge. And so I will say that it's ever since then, I have kind of flipped the script and I feel a pride of what I've gone through and how I can share my story and bring others in, not only to educate, but to bring awareness to TBI overall, and also to advocacy for yourselves as it pertains to things going on medically. But also just, an opportunity to open up a space where folks don't have to feel like they're alone. And in fact, when I was going through treatment, I created a Reddit thread and I was able to connect with someone in a similar position as me who was in need of moral support. And his name is Danny. He lives in India. He's on the opposite side of the world. But because I was able to share my story on Reddit, we were able to support each other through treatment, sharing our challenges and sharing solutions and things that were benefiting both of us. So I'm taking a different approach answering this question, but these are some of the things that I did that kind of fed me both personally and professionally. And within the professional space, before becoming a leader on my team, I was building out, and we continue to build out a lot of disability and neurodiversity inclusion programming, as well as interviewing processes. And so, with my experience, I never thought of myself as having a disability, although I have ADHD, anxiety, and depression until I had this TBI. And I said, wow, the world looks so different now. What can I do to open it up and to make it more accessible for everyone in the space that I'm in? So that's how it kind of feeds it professionally as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Camille. And I think we are starting to talk about some of this, but I want to specifically call out disclosure. And disclosure is a very personal decision. There isn't one right way to approach this. 2 years ago, when I found out that I had the tumor, I had to disclose in some way as I needed time off, right? I needed to have surgery. I needed time to heal. I didn't know what that would even look like, how much time. Actually, I remember telling my my boss, I need 2 weeks. Somehow I thought 2 weeks would be perfect to bounce back from brain surgery. I don't know what I was thinking, but disclosing was the best way for me to help my team understand the support that I needed then and what I continue to need now as I navigate living with this TBI. So I approach disclosure from a very practical perspective. What is going to help me effectively get my job done in this case, or even personally, I'm a very practical person. So Camille, can you talk about how you approach disclosure and what that looked like for you?
Absolutely. And Jen, very similar to yourself, I didn't really have a choice to disclose as I had to go on medical leave pretty quickly. However, I will say though that given the support that I received from my manager, my team, and a group within Bloomberg Human Resources that manages our accommodation needs for all employees, and honestly, the psychological safety that my team and managers have nurtured, I felt super comfortable disclosing, my ever evolving needs. I kind of talked to this a little bit before, but I didn't know what I needed until I had to, kind of work through these challenges. But this came to the forefront, especially as I became aware of new symptoms that I never had to manage in the past. Some of those symptoms, I think, Carol, you mentioned a few of these too. I have light sensitivity, you all saw this in real time, but I have memory loss and fatigue. It just really takes over. And as you're trying to figure these things out and problem solve, it takes a lot add on. It took a lot out on me. Another piece too is I didn't expect, but I have a loss of balance and some bouts of vertigo. And so in our building, we have elevators in the Bloomberg offices, and some elevators don't stop on all floors. But I have an accommodation with my pass where I can go to any floor in the event that I don't feel comfortable walking up and down the stairs, right? But ultimately, I didn't really have that opportunity, but I'm more that opportunity to disclose, to choose if I wanted to disclose. However, it's only going to help me disclosing. So that's what I would say.
You, Carol, do you have anything to add there?
Yes, I would say, and just echoing some of what you shared, Jen, at the beginning, disclosure is very personal. But for me, it's actually been a bit of an evolution. So earlier in my career, I didn't really think about it as disclosure at all. I didn't necessarily identify as having a disability, and I didn't see it as something that needed to be shared, quite honestly. And even when I started working in accessibility, it was really about creating solutions based on my own lived experiences rather than talking about my experience directly, which is quite interesting. So it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't feeling safe about it, I just hadn't framed it that way. More recently, I've really been thinking about disclosure differently. And a big part of my role leading accessibility, thinking about disability inclusion and neurodiversity, I see it as an opportunity to really create connection. When you share, just like we're doing today, when you share parts of your experience, it could really help others feel seen or feel more comfortable sharing their own. That's why we try to encourage psychological safety. And for me, it's still not something I feel the need to do all the time. It's just part of who I am. Like, I sit in a room with no lighting and I don't even think about it. But for others, they walk by and think, I wonder why she's sitting in there in the dark. And a lot of it shows up in how I structure my work and life. But I do think that when people feel comfortable sharing, it creates more openness and more understanding and just creates better environments for everyone. So it's been quite an evolution for me, but I do think the psychological safety aspect of it is so important to really make people have that feeling.
Yes, and thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. And on in addition to disclosure, and I think Camille brought this up, accommodation, right? So I want to shift to talking a little bit about accommodation. For me, I find things that are simple um, are often most helpful. And so, as I mentioned before, something like dark mode on my screen, I didn't even realize all the new cell phones have that feature, right? Your screen has that feature. Even my iPad has that feature. So that's such a simple thing that I can easily take care of. And then that definitely helps reduce the strain for me. Something else, managing my calendar. Back-to-back meetings all day long would be a real strain. So making sure that I can pace myself, ensure that there are breaks built in, stand up, walk away from the screen every so often before symptoms really escalate. That is also helpful for me. And additionally, flexibility is key. I have medical appointments and regular doctor visits all the time. So that adjustment to my schedule, being able to take those appointments and not having to worry, it seems like such small things, but collectively it really helps me maintain balance and stay fully engaged. So Carol, can you talk about, you talked about the lights in your office, but can you talk about other accommodations that have been helpful to you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think some of what you described really resonates with me, Jen. I would say some of the most helpful accommodations for me have been quite simple, but very intentional. So, a big part of it, as I mentioned, has been managing sensory environments, things like lighting, noise, and just overall stimulation. Highly stimulating environments or long periods of social or cognitive intensity can just be quite draining. So, being mindful of that has been really important, which is interesting for someone who's a really social person. Earlier on, when I started my recovery, my needs were more immediate and visible. So, as I was regaining my ability to speak, even things like speaking in front of groups or answering questions off the cuff were very difficult, very, very difficult. And which in my role is a big part of what I do, of course. So a lot of the support at that time was around giving me space to rebuild that. And a big, huge thank you to, my leaders at Deloitte and my team, whether that was, more time to prepare, more structured conversations, or just simply understanding that I was working through that recovery was so important. And over time, that's something I've been able to rebuild and strengthen. Now it's shifted. It's less about specific tools and more about flexibility and structure, just as you described, Jen. And I think things like pacing high cognitive work across the day, having enough focus time outside of meetings, and then just building in space for breaks has been really important for me. And what's interesting is that many of the supports that help someone with a brain injury can actually benefit everyone. So clear communication, more thoughtful meeting practices, and more flexibility and structure in how work gets done. It's just important for everyone. And I think one really important thing about accommodations is we tend to think about it as static and obvious. And I'm speaking, I think, to my situation in particular. In reality, accommodations can be temporary, evolving, and just highly individualized depending on the situation as well.
Thank you, Carol. Camille, you started to talk about accommodations a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more formal or informal accommodations that have been useful to you?
For sure. And also, I echo everything that Jen and Carol have mentioned with regards to, sometimes it's the simple things, but I will say that I am privileged to work at a company that provides spaces for employees no matter what they're going to leverage those spaces for. And so for example, we have some what we call recharge rooms, where you can control the lighting, you can control all of these things, that kind of get overwhelming when we think about sensory overload. And there are also even some alternative workspaces. We have an open layout, so there's a lot of chatter, there's a lot of activity, and so sometimes I need to step away from that. And Jen, you were mentioning taking a step, taking a break, things like this. One of my favorite places to kind of go and retreat to is we have these quiet boxes, and everything is what is this word? Noise proof? That's a word, right? Yeah, it's the
Noise
one.
canceling. Yeah.
Noise canceling little booths. Thank you. So sometimes I'll go in there and just try to reset, because I'm in a really big like meeting industry, if you will, always in meetings back to back to back to back. And sometimes you need to just take a moment to take a breather. I like to call myself an extroverted introvert. If I'm in these spaces, I need to be able to take breaks and kind of hide for a little bit and then reset and come back. Something else that I will say too is I heavily use in any Zoom call or any virtual calls, I use our closed captioning and transcripts just so that I can get back into what's going on and I can focus. Additionally, I started deploying Zoom AI notes so that I can focus on the meeting rather than taking copious notes in fear of missing information or forgetting it because of my memory challenges. And then I guess the other piece too, and Jenny, you talked about this as well with regards to the need for flexibility. That is definitely something that is an ongoing conversation with my manager, with my team. And so, I have all of my MRI scans and other appointments that I need to do. And so having that flexibility to either have an open conversation with my leadership and saying, hey, yeah, I need to work from home on this day or these two, whatever the case is. That's also part of that accommodation, if you will. That's kind of what I call accommodations. And so I guess just to drill home that accommodations can be as simple as having closed captioning on in your meeting. I think that's something I just wanted to make sure to kind of drill there. But yeah, those are some of the ways in which I have some accommodations both at work and at home.
Thank you both. And it really is. So our next thought is, what's so surprising? What do you think people are surprised about, right, when they learn you have TBI? And I feel like we've been talking about this all along, but for me, one of the things is it's mostly invisible, at least for me, right? And so people may not even realize that this is something that I've experienced or something that I live with. And they then also may not realize the effort that goes into managing managing fatigue, managing your processing and your processing challenges. And at the same time, here we are thriving professionally, right? So I think that to me is one of the most surprising and amazing things. But Camille, Carol, any thoughts on when you talk about having a TBI, what sometimes surprises people?
I so I think I would echo everything you just said. Maybe Camille, you're smiling because you feel the same. I think one of the things I have heard, and keep in mind everything I'm going to say is said with good intentions, is that I don't fit the stereotype of what some might expect a disability to look like. Some things I've also heard is, you look great. And we do joke about that sometimes where it's because it's completely invisible. It's difficult for people to understand what that could mean. And I would say for me, leading a team in fast paced, high demand environment, and where constant engagement is expected, there's just that assumption that if someone appears to be operating without friction, they must not be managing anything behind the scenes. But in reality, many people with brain injuries and other invisible disabilities are just doing that. They're, leading, delivering, and then managing cognitive load and sensory environments in ways others don't see. So just echoing exactly what you said. Yeah.
Yeah, you all said this so well, but I'm just laughing and smiling because, it's again, with good intention, but you don't look like you had brain cancer. And, I'm just like, I don't know what that looks like, but this is it, this is me. So I actually try to not try, I proactively when I'm meeting, new people, new teams, or I'm working with a new stakeholder, or whatever the case may be, I proactively disclose. I'm like, look, I just need to let you know what's going on here behind the scenes, because my processing times are slower, right? I'm not, for folks that I worked with before, I call it the before times. For folks that I worked with in the before times, I am a completely different person from who that was. And so I have this responsibility for education so that they can give me grace and they can understand when things aren't clicking for me, why, and what structure is needed or what clear communication is needed. But it's a lot of the times exactly what Carol said, but you look great. And nobody said that I looked ugly. It's just, like of course we look great, but there's a lot that's going on in the background, like so many invisible disabilities. And, my takeaway for everyone is just like, you always have to think about external factors and internal factors. If my wires are not connecting one day and I can't show up for my team the way that I usually show up, I'll let them know immediately, y'all, this is what's going on. And this is what I do, right? I feel comfortable and confident in who I am and how TBI has, adjusted my life or changed my life, if you will. And so I think the more that I sit into that, the more I am just thrilled to tell people like this is what happened to me. And it's a fun, like little awkward moment. And I have to tell them, relax, everything's fine, I'm here. But it's just like you don't think about this immediately as a disability, like Carol said, until you then learn just how inaccessible the world is. But then you work through it and you lean into opportunities like this and organizations like this one to get that support and that exposure to different perspectives.
Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both for sharing. And it's okay if we make a little light of it. It happened to us, right? So we're okay.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. I want to talk a little bit about some of our strengths. So for me, living with the TBI has made me much more intentional about communication, organization, prioritization, given me a deeper sense of awareness around accessibility and inclusion. And all of this has definitely made me a stronger collaborator, leader, and team member because I intentionally consider how different people are experiencing the workplace. Managing a chronic neurological condition, it requires constant adjustment, and those skills translate well into navigating the complex work environments where we are. So Camille, what strengths do you see? What has made you stronger as a result of having a TBI?
Sure. I would say that my problem solving skills have absolutely improved. That improves as I try to continue to figure out what works for me and how I can think about those around me, especially now as I lead a team, and really adjust the way in which I communicate or present, or even how I present and how I operate. And ultimately, what I will say is that a huge strength is that this propels the drive toward accessibility and truly building spaces that are for us by us, and being in a space where we can have a direct impact within recruitment, is just it's incredible, it's invaluable. And I think just having had this experience, I can bring that perspective in spaces where these disabilities, not even just TBIs, but disabilities and neurodiversities are not spoken about. So I would say that those are some of the strengths I'd like to highlight.
Thanks. Carol, any strengths you would like to tell us about?
I think one of the most defining parts of my experience has been learning to adapt and continuing to move forward even when things didn't look the way they used to. So there's a real moment of acceptance that comes with it. You realize that you're not able to operate in the same way, and you have to decide what that means for you. And I think for me, it became about redefining what success means to me and rebuilding it in a different way. And that journey is not linear, by the way. If you know someone who's going through this, they're likely navigating their own process of discovery and acceptance, and it's really not always visible. So it made me more intentional about how I work, how I prioritize, and how I create environments for others just because of my own experience. And I'm more committed to, just in my role, but in general, creating spaces where people can perform without having to hide what they're managing. And I will say, I'm a very patient person, but these experiences forced me to be more patient with myself and others. I was forced, it was not a choice. And I believe that this is also just the standard for any type of recovery. And the final thing I will say that it's a little bit more personal is, as a result of this, I became very passionate about brain health. So good nutrition, sleep, and longevity, we all need it, but for me, it's a requirement. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. So we've talked about a lot today, and we've heard some great tips throughout this conversation. For me, it's important to share what will help me succeed, not necessarily every detail about my diagnosis itself. And it's just okay to continue to figure out what you need, as we've talked about. I'm still learning the best strategies. I'm only 2 years into this journey. And so I want to say also, it's okay to ask for help, which I will personally admit, this is not something I am good at. I'm the one who gets things done. I'm not the one who asks for help. But as Carol said, as Camila said, when it comes to your brain, it is just so different. This is a different experience. This is a different type of disability, injury, whatever you want to call it, to deal with, that you really have to give yourself grace. And please remember to ask for help when you need it. At least that is my advice. Carol, any advice you want to give someone living with a TBI around how to talk about it, how to ask for what they need, or just how to be?
I will echo what you've just said. I think it's so important. And I think the hardest part is that you're often still figuring it out yourself. So instead of feeling like you need to have the perfect explanation, start with what you're noticing, like what's working for you and what isn't. That's the most simple thing. You don't need to over explain or justify it. You just need to help people understand what enables you to do your best work, if I was speaking professionally. And also, it's okay if that changes, because that is something you just continue to refine over time.
Thank you. Camille, any advice?
So I have a lot of what you all mentioned, but I'm going to read through it anyway. And one of my own accommodations that I do now, everybody here on this call, is I write out everything that I want to talk about because if not, I forget about it. So looking here at my notes, I just wanted to mention everything that Carol and Jen just mentioned. So it's important to figure out what you need, and that will shift as you continue to figure out how you now navigate life and work. What you may need at work is not something that you may need at home or in your personal life, and vice versa, and understanding that. Also, giving yourself grace as you come to identify new hurdles. And once you identify and adjust, and you find an adjustment that works for you, um, whenever possible, or you identify the correct team or individual in your workplace or in your personal life to discuss your new needs, it's really important to understand that ultimately it's up to you. It's your decision if you want to disclose. It's your responsibility if you want to share that information. But understanding, how is it going to benefit me? And just understanding that like every day is a different day. People say take it day by day. I say take it 1 minute at a time. Things move really quickly, and so I think just taking a time to pause and understand and reflect, like you're here, right? If you're going through a TBI or anything else, you're here. You're here with us today. That's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment in itself, and so truly just being able to give yourself that pace, that space, and that grace to understand that you are an ever evolving person, no matter what's going on.
Camille and Carol, this has been so informative. I thank you both for all that you have shared. If you would please take a moment to give our audience one final piece of advice or one takeaway, whether they are someone living with a TBI or just here to listen and learn, what would you leave our audience with?
I have a nice, sweet, and short one, and that is number one, everybody, be kind to yourselves. And the other thing is, we got this.
I love that. I would say I'm going to show up as my accessibility leader role. And I will say that disability inclusion is really about how you show up for people over time. So it requires patience, flexibility, and just a willingness to figure things out together. When I experienced my injury, it wasn't just my journey. My team and I had to learn how to work differently in real time. We were all learning together. And that required trust, transparency, and just open communication on both sides. So I would say the most effective environments are the ones that really stay flexible, focus on strengths, and really understand that support is ongoing. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you both again. And whether you are someone living with a TBI or you know someone who is, remember that compassion goes a long way. Small adjustments, open conversations, flexibility, this can all make a huge difference in someone's ability to fully show up and fully participate in work and life. When people have the right tools, the understanding, the environment, they can contribute incredible talent and perspective. And conversations like this are an important step toward building inclusive workplaces. So we thank you for listening to us, and we are happy to answer any questions. Renee, did you want to come back on for questions?
Yes, I will. Well, first of all, thank you, all three of you. This was a really valuable conversation. Maybe I can spotlight myself here. And you shared so many great insights. There's a lot of chatter going on in the Q&A and the chat. So I'm going to try and summarize some of it to see if we can get through some of it. I think you all demonstrated that you can experience a traumatic brain injury at any point in your life. And that's what seems to be coming up in the chat, that we have some people who are new students or the parents of students who are graduating and looking for career and experiencing like processing challenges due to the TBI. We have another person who had several car accidents and is looking to switch careers to something that is maybe more accommodating and suitable for their disability or what they're experiencing. And another question around how do you manage performance conversations with someone who might a manager who might not understand your disability. So there's kind of throughout different life stages and what people are going through living with a TBI, they are facing different challenges. So really looking for a job, changing careers, and just managing performance expectations. I don't expect all of you to tackle all of those, but if you have any insights into how to manage some of those components of a person's professional career, hear them.
Happy to jump in for, I think you mentioned, Renee, the performance conversation with the manager.
Yes.
Okay, so I think from my lived experiences in the professional world, what I would recommend is if it's not a conversation that you would feel comfortable having with your manager and disclosing how you operate or the support that you need, and how that might be manifesting in your everyday work, is leaning into, if available at your company, leaning into an employee resource team or an employee accommodation team where you can have these protected conversations, where you share, perhaps some of the exactly that, some of the challenges or support that you may need, and then that gets communicated over to your leadership chain so that they can take the appropriate actions. That is a way in which I'm going to use a word, one can safely disclose and share with a person who is meant to help kind of guide you and your manager in kind of the best way in which they can manage you, and the best way that they can, I'm going to say that, the best way that they can manage you and give you the support that you need. And so that's how I would kind of tackle that. Now, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to pause there.
And so, Camille, I would echo with what you just said. I think, and every organization is different. I think for our organization, we have something called coaches. If there's an opportunity to have a coach that you feel safe and comfortable with, where they can speak with your direct leader, so it's not directly with someone that you may not feel comfortable disclosing to, that's also an opportunity if it's not an accommodation lead. So it's really about finding that person that you feel safe and comfortable to share a little bit more with. But an employee resource group is always something so important, so you can share lived experiences and have that safe environment to share that information as well.
And I would just share, coming from a smaller organization, right? You all are talking about employee resource group or an HR or representative. We at Lime, we are a small group, but I was extremely fortunate that obviously we are a disability organization, and I felt very comfortable. My supervisor at the time was our CEO, Susan Lang, and she probably thought I was absolutely silly to say, I'll just be back in 2 weeks. It'll be no problem after brain surgery. But she was so kind and so compassionate that it made it very easy to extend and to say, you know what, I'm not even putting full sentences together yet. I can't start meeting with my partners again. I can't be on screen. There's so many things going on. I definitely underestimated this, but it was just easy to have that conversation in this environment. So I do think that your environment really does matter, and where you are matters, and figuring out if the employers that you're looking at are going to be supportive. That's important. That's very important for anyone, but especially if you are someone living with a disability, you want to find the right fit for you.
Thank you. Another question came in about being dismissed. I think, Camille, you were talking about being dismissed. I know, Jen, you and I have had some conversations about this. For your symptoms, how do you continue forward? How do you handle that? Would you have done anything differently now in retrospect?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So, I love data. And so after really weird way to open up, but after I had that experience with the neurologist, they sent me home. And when I went home, I was just like, I'm curious. I just want to know having, like what happens with women who get seizures and brain tumors and things like this, just kind of thinking out loud and didn't want to get sucked into WebMD. But then I started looking at I think it's called Brain Tumor Charity and a few other resources. And they showed research behind women being less diagnosed than men when it comes to brain challenges or tumors or cancers. And it is, of course, because men are more prevalent in getting this. However, I dug in deeper to understand, again, it's because of women and the hormones and we're emotional or whatever the case may be. And so that just propelled me into going back. I said, no, sir, I need to see you again and something's going on and I would like an MRI. And I think that in the medical field, or, doctors, nurses, et cetera, are amazing. But there are parts of the field where it makes it really challenging for some folks to get some support. And so, I was told, but because I wasn't having migraines or headaches, insurance wasn't going to cover it, right? Thankfully, I kept advocating for myself. I was like, hey, I had many headaches last week. I think that counts. I'm not telling you all to lie, but I just essentially had to do whatever I could to get that MRI. And so I was able to move forward in that space. But I was just really flabbergasted, and not shocked, but I was pretty flabbergasted when I was just reading on, the fact that women, we often get overlooked when it comes to some medical diagnoses. And so if you feel like something's not right, you advocate for that and you go forward. You know yourself, you're in your body, and you need to take that strength and really run with it. Especially for folks that are in underrepresented spaces or genders.
Yeah. And I agree. I had a similar experience. I had been having headaches. I had been having headaches for years. And it was, oh, you're a mom. Oh, you work, your family, your kids, this, that. That's why you have headaches. It's just a headache. Rest, take care, go do something for yourself. So I did. I went to have a nice massage at a spa, and then I fainted. And that was when I was allowed to have an MRI because I literally passed out and hit my head on the floor. So, it sometimes we are dismissed or we're told it's nothing to worry about because you don't have something extreme happening, and then it takes something extreme to get recognized.
Thanks, Jen. Another question, and you all kind of talked about it a little bit in having to have time away. So having gaps in your work experience, it sounds like for the most part, you all had very supportive teams and managers. That's obviously not always the case. So how do you manage that even just for yourselves? You're all very high achieving and, very busy people. How did you manage making sure that your peers, your managers didn't, that you managed that time away? And then from a bigger picture, for some people who might have gaps in their resumes or in their experience, how would you recommend managing that?
I can start. I would say, similar to what we've been sharing, is you have to advocate for what you need and you have to continue to have that clear communication. I would say, in my experience, I've been very fortunate with such an incredible, inclusive, and accessible organization already. I would say my team has been so supportive and my leaders, but regardless of whether that's the case or not in someone's experience, you have to continue to advocate for what you need. And I think continuing to demonstrate that is a strength. It's not a weakness, and that will continue to develop over time. So that's what I'd share.
Anyone else? No? Okay. I think we're sort of wrapping up, but one person asked for any recommendations on organizational tools or anything that you maybe want to talk about you can't live without that really helps you manage your disability or your TBI.
I use something called Flux, and it's something that actually changes the lighting of your desktop screen. And that's actually very important to me. It reduces, there's lots of accessibility features now from a digital accessibility perspective, but I still use that and it gets rid of the blue light, which helps with headaches over time.
I also use Flux. I love it so much, and I always tell people at work about it. You can easily download it. This is the actually, I don't want to give you all the wrong link, but pretty sure it's this one here.
I
Yeah,
put the name in the
perfect.
chat.
Awesome. So I love that tool. I also, as I mentioned earlier, Zoom AI Notes. We also, in my organization, we have the ability to record meetings. And so whenever possible, I am advocating for meetings to be recorded and placed in an accessible space for me to go back to at any moment in time.
Amazing. Jen, do you have Flux?
I don't, but I
I
wrote
think
it
you're going to get
down.
Flux.
I wrote it down as soon as they both said it. I need to
I put
get
the link
that.
in the chat there as well, just in case.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to add, Jen?
No.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we can wrap up here. You've all been amazing, Jen. Thank you for moderating. Camille and Carol, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Hopefully, you're seeing everybody's appreciation in the chat. I would like to just let you know, for some of you who are joining as parents and talking about your children, please encourage them to join the Lyme Network. We have all sorts of resources that can support them. We have a career coach on staff who can work with them to identify their strengths, to develop a strategy for going through the recruiting process. In addition to anybody else who's looking to make career changes, this is not just an organization for students, it's for experienced professionals as well. And there's no fee to join our network or take advantage of any of our resources. So we definitely encourage you to tap into all that Lyme has to offer. Somebody asked if you will get the recording. You will. As soon as we have time to edit it, we will send out a link to the recording to everyone who registered. And hopefully, I think we covered almost everything in the chat. But thank you again so much. And we really appreciate you joining us and the three of you for sharing your stories. So
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much for having us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.